And we're starting tonight with the topic of immigration. Dulce Valencia is an undocumented 20-year-old who can legally stay in this country because of the president's executive action that holds kids available to stay in this country, even though they were brought here illegally, to stay as long as they're working or in school. It's known as DACA. They call themselves Dreamers. Dulce says she supports Clinton. And Dulce, where is your question? Muy buenas noches, Dulce. ¿Cómo estás?
Buenas noches, ¿estoy bien y usted?
Un placer verte.
Un placer.
Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias a usted. Senator Bernie Sanders, you stated in the past that the reason why you voted against immigration reform in 2007 was because it wasn't perfect. As president, would you veto our shot at immigration reform if it wasn't deemed perfect by you?
Well, I voted for immigration reform in 2013 because it was a much better piece of legislation. I voted against the legislation in 2007 in agreement with groups like LULAC, one of the large Latino organizations, in agreement with the AFL-CIO for a number of reasons, but I'll tell you one of them. Included in that legislation was a guest worker provision, which organizations saw is almost akin to slavery. Guest workers came in, and if they didn't do what their bosses wanted them to do, if they didn't accept exploitation and cheating, then they're going to be thrown out of this country. And many of those workers were terribly, terribly exploited. And that was the major reason that I voted against that. I don't want to see workers in this country exploited. But I did vote for the 2013. And let me say this more importantly. I want to take 11 million undocumented people in this country out of the shadows, out of the fear that they are experiencing every single day. I want Congress to do its job. Under Senator Reid, we did pass comprehensive immigration reform. Unfortunately, the House did not. As president, I will do everything that I can to pass immigration reform and a path toward citizenship for those who today are undocumented.
Even if it's not to your best liking?
Of course.
Even
we'll
if
do the
not...
best that we... Look, it's not that it didn't think it was perfect. You know, it's not a question of being perfect. Nothing is perfect. That had particular egregious provisions in it.
Gracias, Aurora. Muchísimas gracias. And now I'd like to say hello to Aurora Aguilar. Aurora, like so many millions of others in the United States, is part of a mixed status family that lives with the fear of deportation of a loved one. Aurora, muy buenas noches.
Muy buenas noches. Yes, my question to you, sir, if you become the president of the United States, what would you do about the bars? My husband, I'm an American citizen, my girl's an American citizen, my husband was here 18 years. I tried to bring him out of the shadows, how you said, and I petitioned him, and they gave him a 10-year bar. He's been in Mexico doing his 10 years, 6 years now we've been separated. My little girl was in kindergarten when he left, the one in the pink right there. And the other one was in middle school, and now she's going to graduate high school this year, and her dad is not here to see that. What would you do to bring my husband home?
What you just described is unacceptable and should not be happening. My immigration policy is to unite families, not to divide families. When I was here in Las Vegas a couple of months ago, I heard a story, a young man who was in the United States military. While he was in the United States military, his wife was deported. Can you believe that? All right. Clearly, those are not the policies. Clearly, those are not the policies that I want to see, and I will change those policies.
How long, when you change, when you get there, how long would it take to change those policies? Because I've been waiting 6 years, 6 years out of my life.
Well, I can't, we will use our executive office and power as much as we can. Hopefully, we'll have the cooperation of the United States Congress.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you.
All right, Senator, we're going to stick with the topic of immigration. I've got Wayne Smith here. He has another question on immigration. He happens to be a veteran. Mr. Smith, come on up. Go ahead.
Yeah, Senator Sanders. Hello, I'm here both as the Vice Chairman of the Nevada Democratic Veterans and Military Families and as an undecided voter. We have become aware that in the last 20 years there have been hundreds of veterans who have served honorably as legal U.S. residents in the military. After discharge, they ran afoul of the law for possession of illegal drugs or another nonviolent crime. As a result, their legal status was revoked and they were deported. In many cases, these veterans ended up in countries they left when small children, often unable to even speak the language. Remember, we're talking about veterans here who served our country and people that are comrades of mine in arms. Is this policy fair, and what would you do about it if you're elected president?
Well, I was the former chairman of the U.S. Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, and in that capacity, I did all that I could to expand health care and provide the benefits that our veterans are entitled to. What you are describing to me seems to me to be an outrage. If people put their lives on the line to defend this country, are willing to die for this country, I don't think you deport those people.
Senator, what is your line when it comes to who gets deported and who's not? President Obama
sorry, I didn't hear that.
President Obama has deported more folks than any president.
Yes.
What is your criteria for deportation at this point for folks that are here in this country?
If people
they're
are
undocumented.
criminals,
What is criminals? Because some people think just being here undocumented.
Not for nonviolent type crimes. If somebody is a violent criminal, they should be deported. But as I said a moment ago, my own view is that our policy as a nation, and what I believe, is we should unite families, not divide families. We should not be sending people back to a country that they could barely remember and a language they may not even be able to speak.
I've asked you a few times about the prioritization of immigration reform.
Right.
And when I've asked you about your first 100 days priorities, you've mentioned a lot of issues, and you haven't put immigration reform first. And some immigration reform advocates are concerned that if you don't put it first, that the same thing that happened in 07, the same thing in 10, how do you prevent that if you don't make it first? As you know, these legislative lifts are hard. And the concern is if it's not first, it may not happen.
Well, when we both had a chance to vote on comprehensive immigration reform in 2007, the bill that Senator Ted Kennedy championed, I voted for it. Senator Sanders voted against it. So I know how important it is to put together a coalition. If I'm fortunate enough to get the Democratic nomination, I will immediately begin working on the priority legislation that I want the Congress to deal with right away, and immigration reform will be among those issues.
One quick follow-up to Chuck's. Usted se compromete, do you promise to deal with immigration reform within the first 100 days?
Absolutely. And we're going to introduce legislation, Jose. We are absolutely going to introduce legislation. I'm going to call everybody on the committee, Democrats and Republicans alike.
Within
Harry.
100 days?
Yeah, I'm going to introduce my priority legislation, and this is at the top of that list. It's going to be introduced, and then I'm going to work as hard as I can to make sure that we get it moved through the congressional process. I can control the introduction of legislation, but the Congress has to get its act in gear. That's why we need to elect a Democratic Senate, so we've got some friends and we got one House that will actually move the legislation.
Secretary, say hello to Rocio Puente. She speaks both English and Spanish. A little bit more comfortable in Spanish, she tells me, so I'm going to translate for her. She wants to ask you about DACA, the president's executive action that gives children brought here illegally through no fault of their own, their parents' temporary legal status. Rocio, muy buenas noches.
Buenas noches. ¿Cómo usted haría posible que los estudiantes que reciben DACA se puedan convertir en residentes permanentes? Ellos viven con mucho temor cuando tienen que renovar su tarjeta cada 2 años.
Tiene toda la razón. Mrs. Clinton, what would you do to make possible that the DACA students become permanent residents? You know, they live with a lot of fear because they have to renew their permits every 2 years, and that is a terrifying prospect for them.
Right. Well, that's why I support the president's executive orders on DACA and DAPA, and I will do everything I can to make sure that they are kept in place. As you know, there's a court action challenging them. I don't know what's going to happen now because of the Supreme Court situation, but I will renew them. I will go further if it's at all legally possible. And I will make this a big political issue because we need to keep those young people working, going to school, being productive members of our society. So I have to tell you, I will do what I can as president. I'm hoping if we win back the Senate and we win the White House again, the Republicans are going to see the error of their ways and quit using immigrants to divide our country and quit taking the kind of mean-spirited actions that they do. You know, I was the first person to call out Donald Trump. I said, basta, enough of this prejudice and paranoia and the kind of language that he uses. So I will do everything I can, not only for the young people who deserve the highest protection, but for their families as well.